Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the CPD session. So today I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Dr. Liana Beattie. Liana is Assistant Head of Department in Education at Edgehill University, and she has a new book, and I'm going to drop details of the book into the chat, and it's called Symbiotic Autoethnography, which is also the title of her talk today. Over to you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me for this CPD session. When you start a new project, you never know whether it's going to take off or whether it's going to die at the beginning of the project. And I'm just so pleased that so many people are getting back to me with questions and comments in relation to this new concept. So hopefully we will have a really nice discussion today, and hopefully this will generate more interest in the subject. A little bit about myself. As you probably guessed from my accent, I'm not a native speaker of English. I was born in Georgia, which is now Republic of Georgia, independent country, but used to be part of the Soviet Union. I always start with this introduction because I'm a trained primary school teacher, and I know when I was teaching, the first thing children said when I entered the classroom, they used to say, "Miss, you speak funny." So that was a really good icebreaker and the starter of the conversation for me to introduce myself and to explain my origin. I've been at Edgehill University for 16 years, and when I started my research on master's and doctoral studies, this is how my interest in autoethnography started. So I'm going to share my screen with you now and get on straight to the talk. Hopefully technology will work. Yeah, Sarah, will you prompt me if people can see or cannot see the slides? Can everybody see the slides? Yeah.
We can see the slides, but they're not in presenter mode at the moment.
So I wonder if I click on slide. Is this better now? Can you?
Perfect.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. So yeah, like I said, I developed interest in autoethnography when working on my doctoral thesis mainly. And in particular, I was inspired by one of Lev Tolstoy's greatest novels, War and Peace, where Tolstoy chronicled the French invasion of Russia and the impact of the Napoleonic era on Tsarist society, not through a precise chronological description of historical events, but through the stories told by people from 5 Russian aristocratic families that you can actually see on that slide. And it was that exploratory capacity of personal stories that determined my methodological commitments within the research design of my study, which was actually about academics' perceptions of educational leadership. I thought it would be interesting for myself and for my audiences and for the readers just to compare how, sorry, I don't know what happened there, how people with, or academics more precise, academics with Soviet background construct their perceptions of educational leadership at a neoliberal university. So that was the focus of my doctoral thesis. And I strongly consider using autoethnographic approach for my research. However, once I considered using this approach, I was immediately faced with a vast number of different approaches that was both overwhelming and promising at the same time. So if you are interested in autoethnography or know anything about autoethnography, you probably would have heard about all this variety of approaches that you see on the screen in front of you. And it includes evocative, analytic, collaborative, critical, and many more, and probably more appearing as I'm speaking at the moment. Sorry, I don't know what's happening, but obviously it's on automatic timing there, and it changes slides even before I intend to. So maybe what I'm going to do, I'm sorry about that. Just 1 second, please, because I don't want this to actually happen. Right, I'm going to speak in this mode. Is it okay with everyone? It's probably my face disappeared, but I hope you can still hear me. Sarah, I can see you. Is it okay if I stay in this mode?
I can still see you as well, Liana. It's fine.
Oh,
you can see you, can hear you.
Excellent, excellent. Yes, and many more appearing as we actually speaking about autoethnography, because autoethnography seems to be very popular research design at the moment. And I think it's growing in terms of varieties and how people approach it. So the next dilemma I had to deal with when I started considering autoethnography in my approach was actually the overwhelming amount of criticism that existed in relation to autoethnography. And you can see on this slide some of the opinions, and I wouldn't even dare to read some of them, but the overall approach there, you can see that some researchers described it as self-confessional, narcissistic, unprincipled, lazy, literally lazy, and we get there to even more extreme opinions about autoethnography. So because the first when I looked at the variety of approaches, I figured out that my study really does not coincide directly with any of the suggested or existing approaches. And also due to this existing criticism, I thought it might be a good idea to work out my own approach to my study that will fit my research question. So that's why I came with an idea of what I call symbiotic autoethnography. And as you can see from this slide, my perception of symbiosis is to embrace the kind of broader understanding of its mostly biological notion that embraces the idea of close interrelation between different aspects of symbiotic autoethnography, which includes 7 different aspects or features. And I suggested that this approach almost synthesizes central aspects from the diversity of existing arguments into one adaptable. I deliberately put framework in inverted commas because I don't want this to be framework in its traditional sense. Because when we say framework, it almost creates in your mind a picture of a table or boxes where everything is very static. I wanted to create something that is more dynamic, that where each of these features, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, can contract, expand, overlap, depending on the nature of your study and depending on your research questions and sub-questions. So you can see from that slide the 7 features of symbiotic autoethnography, which I thought were absolutely essential to include in perhaps any autoethnographic study. And I will go now through each one of them individually, and hopefully this will trigger some questions and further discussion.
I think you need to move the slides on, Liana. We're still stuck on the criticism.
Oh, are you? Oh,
yes.
Sorry. Now let's see whether I can actually, I don't know what is happening. I'm sorry. It's always, right. How about now? Sorry.
That's fine. We can see the slides, but they're not in presenter view, but I think we can cope with that.
Yeah, okay. Is it symbiotic autoethnography slide? Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Lovely, thank you. So the first feature is that I included in symbiotic approach is, I called it temporality. And I didn't coin this, this word, and I know you probably heard about this previously. Temporality is related to time and time-related context, which in my view are absolutely central to our understanding of any cultural phenomena. And yet, despite the growing corpus of autoethnographic research, a relatively small number of studies make the concept of time their investigative focus. Well, in fact, a few autoethnographers seem to neglect altogether the temporal aspect of their experiences, both theoretically and methodologically. And that kind of strikes me as a surprising gap, considering the significance of time in our life occurrences and really everything that we do. So that's why you will see temporality included in my approach as an essential feature of symbiotic autoethnography, and also as a way of theorizing about the dynamic nature of our experiences. Oxford Dictionary definition of temporality as it defines it as the state of existing within or having some relationship with time. However, I argue that when it comes to autoethnography, this definition sounds incomplete, as autoethnographic temporality includes more than just reference to time, but also incorporates the qualities of being subjective, locational, and evanescent. And I will discuss these three aspects further in my presentation. It is not my intention to offer a precise definition of autoethnographic temporality, as most definitional attempts, in my view, they seem to contain some speculative flaws, as I would describe them. Hence, I propose a kind of loose definition of temporality, and you can see it on this screen. So in this sense, symbiotic temporality for me is researchers' perceptions of chronological times, which I define as subjective element, as experienced across different localities, which I describe as locational, and captured in the moment of writing, which I call evanescent. So in this sense, symbiotic temporality is a snapshot of our temporal recollections of events, places, feelings, and relations, which are almost caught in the illusory stillness during one specific moment of our writing. So the issue of autoethnographers' subjective perceptions of time can be seen as an inherent and inescapable feature almost of autoethnographic temporality. To say that autoethnographers only refer to precise chronological units of time in their narratives is really an absurdity, as the evidence from a wide assortment of autoethnographic studies against this positivist claim is quite convincing. And yet, resigning to complete rejection of chronological time for many autoethnographers would be totally impossible. So in my view, autoethnographic temporality in symbiotic approach serves almost as a middle ground that allows autoethnographers to both anchor their stories within specific chronological times while acknowledging and negotiating their subjective experiences of these times. For example, when I was writing about the dissolution of the Soviet Union on a specific date, I was referring to this date in my chronological understanding of the time, but my focus was not really on the historical events. My focus was on my subjective perception of that time, of what it actually meant for me to be in the Soviet Union on that specific day. So moving on to the next aspect of temporality, which I call locality. Our autoethnographic narratives also have a kind of inseparable connection to various social-cultural localities as perceived by the researcher at specific temporal points. These localities, however, are different from locations, which are associated with specific geographical spaces or settings. Localities, as I understand them, in most cases are not defined by any visible boundaries. And really speaking, they can only exist in the imagination of researchers or their participants. So sometimes researchers would perceive themselves as tied to static localities that are moving through time. And sometimes they would feel that what I described as time is moving through them as integral part of these localities. So I define autoethnographic temporal locality here as a particular cultural phenomena under study that is demarcated by commonly acknowledged or illusory boundaries as they appear at the moment of writing. You can see here that I'm very keen to emphasize that everything that we describe in our autoethnographies is true in traditional sense, only at the moment of writing. And I will talk a little bit more about that.
So Liana, can you click onto the next slide for us? We're still seeing temporality.
Yeah, well, it is okay because I'm still talking about temporality.
Okay, that's fine.
So the next one is the evanescent nature of autoethnographic temporality. And I consider it useful to kind of juxtapose it here to our traditional chronological perceptions of time associated with a notion of past, present, and future as kind of ultimate time reference. However, using this structural reference does not harmonize with autoethnographic writing, in my view, since our experiences and memories are non-sequential. They are subject to different interpretations depending on specific locations in certain spaces and times. So in this sense, what I call past present, almost as one word with a slash in between, becomes just another unhelpful dichotomy, as we actually cannot separate our past from our present. Well, if you think about this in relation to your own perceptions, indeed, what is our past? Can we point at it? Can we touch it? Is it just our memories of the past? But it cannot be, since our past only exists as our present memories of it. The memories that are experienced now as we look back at our life experiences from this very moment. I think this is a crucial moment for me that is related to symbiotic temporality, because it is important, in my view, to acknowledge in our autoethnographic writing that what we remember now is going through all these years of our recollections and our reflections on what happened in the past. So the way we're writing about our memories today can be and is quite different from how we actually understood these events when we were going through them at that particular moment of time. So thus engaging with the concept of temporality goes beyond just moving in time between the past and the present, but rather it is about taking account of and acknowledging our subjective position in relation to chronological events in our attempt to what I call hold them still by the process of writing. It's almost a snapshot. We almost catching this moment in the process of writing on paper. So we write our autoethnographic stories, looking back at the events that chronologically took place in the past. But what makes us apprehend the idea of the past is the fact that we have present memories of them, or what I call present past. So tomorrow, of course, we might remember and interpret same events and feelings in a different way. And from this standpoint, autoethnographic temporality is a symbiotic fusion of past, present, and future, which almost denies a neat chronological arrangement of events, feelings, and relations. Placing these observations in connection to each other enables us to sketch these tensions that surround any autoethnographic project in relation to the way temporal aspects of the study are presented and justified. So symbiotic approach in a way suggests making these discussions explicit, highlighting the limits and possibilities of thinking outside and beyond the logic of chronological time towards almost social dimensions of temporal understanding as entanglements of times, sites, experiences, subjects, objects that help researchers to explore the ways these dominant notions of time allow for specific societal hierarchies and powers to persist as real. So in this sense, I thought that in symbiotic approach, autoethnographic temporality almost decolonizes conventional way of knowledge production, allowing us, autoethnographers, to cross the boundaries of qualitative inquiry beyond its Eurocentric conventions, locating their subjective experiences in a broader spatio-temporal reason of almost global cultural nuances. So, because temporality is such a complex notion, I dwelled a little bit longer on this slide. Apologies for that. But I'm moving on now to the researcher's omnipresence as the next aspect of symbiotic approach. So, this aspect of my autoethnographic praxis has been influenced by Anderson's concept of complete member researcher status. If you are familiar with autoethnography and the variety of autoethnographic approaches, you would have heard about Anderson's approach of analytic autoethnography. So my concept of the researcher's omnipresence almost contests Anderson's interpretation of the researcher's membership. This is his term, researcher's membership, which he describes as being one of the individuals composing a group who has another cultural identity and goals of documenting and analyzing action, as well as purposely engaging in it. So this idea of being a member of a group that has another cultural identity, I thought that was slightly problematic for me in terms of symbiotic approach. Because most of our autoethnographic studies cover lengthy period of our lives. So when we are members of specific cultural groups, first, without having an identity of a researcher, and second, not trying to become a participant observer. And I was thinking about my own study and my own experiences of Soviet times. When I was living and breathing this Soviet culture and Soviet aspects of leadership, I didn't think of myself as participant observer. And I wasn't specifically taking any notes, thinking of my future possibility of using these notes as data. So this created a kind of a contrast in my understanding of autoethnography and Anderson's understanding of researcher membership and his concept of complete member researcher. So nevertheless, I was fully embedded in that culture and I was part of that culture, and thus I was a complete member of it. The position that I call the researcher's omnipresence, or a property of being present everywhere at the same time in a form of disrupted multiple selves. This is another complex idea that I introduced as part of autoethnographic approach, because I strongly believe that our identity is really composed of multiple selves. And we think about this, for example, perhaps in a simplified context as different roles. For example, some of you will be at some point focusing on being academics, at some point parents, at another point friends, etc. So all these multiple selves combined together create our one self. And also the concept of membership also seemed to indicate to me a specific time framework that allows the researcher to enter and to leave a specific cultural setting by almost canceling their membership. But my autoethnographic approach involves a permanent omnipresence of different layers of cultural experiences at the same time. So what I mean by that is I cannot remove from my identity or from myself, from a capital letter here, the experiences that I went through my Soviet times. So they almost layered on top of each other and create my layered cultural experiences that happen at the same time, as my mind almost struggles to separate myself as an insider from myself as a researcher within any particular context. So that's all I want to say in relation to researchers' omnipresence. And now I'm moving on to the next aspect of a symbiotic approach, which I call polyvocality. And again, the same as with temporality, the concept of polyvocality as a methodological and ethical feature of qualitative research is not new. Such researchers and theories as Bachtin, Tobin, Anderson, Congergood, they all wrote about the issue related to representing multiple voices in researcher studies. And leaning on their arguments, really, I suggest an enhanced interpretation of polyvocality in the context of symbiotic autoethnography. And I suggest that it is a space for capturing simultaneously these complex entanglements of autoethnographers' narratives with the other, and other here with capital letter, where the other includes the characters from researcher stories, their participants, and the researcher's own multiple selves. So through our autoethnographic journeys, our what I would call fractured segments of self become disturbed, managed, and shaped by the encounters with this multifaceted other. These multiple others form a symbiotic polyvocal narrative where each of the voices has equal significance in representing this mesh of socio-cultural connections with the purpose of not, well, I'm using here Patty Leather's words, not looking harder or more closely, but of seeing what frames our seeing. So that is my understanding of polyvocality. And on many occasions, I'm asked the question, can we include participants in autoethnography? And my answer is always yes. You can include participants in your autoethnography, because what this will do, it will support your voice as autoethnographer, or contradict and disrupt your voice, but the voices of other people, voices of the other, which will create a polyvocal and multidimensional narrative that creates a stronger suggestions and stronger assumptions that can work better towards your research question. Okay, so moving on to the next one, in my understanding of symbiotic autoethnography, and I thought it was absolutely crucial to include evocative aspect. And my decision to include evocative storytelling as another aspect of autoethnographic praxis has been provoked by a number of authors, and undeniably autoethnographic studies have to include evocative stories. Since when the researchers emphasize the personal, it's almost a new kind of theorizing occurs through this juxtaposing of emotion, voices, temporality, and points of view, enabling us to read and what Ellis and Bochner say, react and reflect with all our senses. And it is appropriate at this point to emphasize that I do not see evocative storytelling and analytic scrutiny as mutually exclusive, though sometimes they are presented in contrast to reference to Ellis and Bochner and Anderson's work. And I maintain that a segregation between evocative and analytic creates another unhelpful dichotomy, leading to a false assumption that critical analysis is almost discordant with emotive text, and that emotionally charged narratives are somehow incompatible with analysis. But I still think that evocative nature of our stories is very important. I always give that example to my students. So if anybody asks me, what is it like to, for example, work at Edgehill University? They will not get the answer to this question through looking at the mission statement. They will not get an answer to this question looking at any documentation or strategic plans, but they will get an answer of this question through my emotive response to this question, and through my stories that contain evocative element. So that was one of the reasoning behind me including evocative aspect as part of autoethnographic symbiotic approach. Now, the next one is interpretative aspect, which, as I have mentioned, I do not support the detachment of evocative writing from analytic work. And thus I see the interpretative analysis as another essential feature of symbiotic autoethnography. And I suggest that interpretative analysis in symbiotic approach aims at merging autoethnographic narratives with a sound theoretical basis that is critically interpreted with consideration of the researcher's omnipresence and across their spatio-temporal experiences. So you can refer to the slide here and see what Spry says about that, and similarly, Alan Collinson. So I am not alone in suggesting that interpretative analysis has to be a strong feature of autoethnographic writing. And that very much also is related to other types of questions that I get from my students and occasionally from my colleagues who are interested in autoethnography. People get back to me asking, I have diaries from 20 years ago. I have photographs from years ago. I have letters and I have notes. Are these things autoethnographies? And my answer is simply no, they are not autoethnographies. Because when we look at the actual word autoethnography, you can see that we cannot avoid the fact that it has three different aspects. Auto, which is your personal reflection on specific cultural phenomena. Ethno, which is the cultural phenomena. And graphy, something that we actually put on paper, something that we have to write and reflect on. So when people say to me that my personal diary is an autoethnography, my response is always go back to the original definition of autoethnography. And for me, out of all the definitions of autoethnography that exist out there, the definition is that autoethnography is an approach to a qualitative inquiry where researchers' subjective experiences are used as data to explore a specific cultural phenomena. So one of the mistakes that my students make is they focus on their own experiences first, where the focus really needs to be on the question, which cultural phenomena am I going to explore? Which cultural phenomena is interesting for me? And then the next question would be, do I have significant experiences of that cultural phenomena? And how can I merge interpretation of this cultural phenomena that already exists out there in research with my own experiences? So that aspect of interpretation indicates that what we explore has to fit somehow into the existing research. It might be that there is something absolutely new that nobody has ever explored, but that creates challenges for us to almost embed this into the existing research. And what the researcher's intention always is to find a gap in existing literature. So this might be a challenge if absolutely brand new topic enters and is trying to be inserted into existing research without any background information on it that already exists. So that is more or less briefly about interpretative aspect of symbiotic approach. And now we're moving on to the political aspect. And these aspects of reflexivity and interpretative analysis really, they intertwine closely with this one, the political or transformative focus of my study, to indicate my intention to problematize and politicize autoethnography. And as, for example, Dororiet and Sambrook say on the slide, to move it beyond a world of harmonious social order. And sometimes again, students get back to me and say, well, I'm going to explore and I'm going to come up with something ridiculous now, a basket weaving. And they say that, well, that is not political. My answer is always the same. Everything that we do, everything around us is political. If we start digging deeper, everything is political. So in this sense, autoethnographic research can contribute to a body of work in which these radical forms of academic writing almost destabilize and discard these dominant discursive dichotomies and explore new ways of interrogating established hierarchies and, well, relations of power within them. And specifically in symbiotic approach, autoethnographers are expected to problematize this aspect of representation and identity through a kind of self-disclosure of their experiences of inequality and social injustice. And so my intention was that in symbiotic autoethnography, the unity of political and transformative aspects form also conceptual synergy that enables autoethnographer representation of their experience as sprices, personal, political, and palpable. So that are my ideas in terms of this aspect of autoethnography. And finally, I'm coming to the final seventh feature of symbiotic approach, which I called reflexivity. If you engaged with autoethnography previously or in any type of qualitative research, you would have heard about this notion. So again, it's not I didn't coin this word, but I have to confirm here my appreciation of reflexivity as a tool for engaging in this self-conscious introspection guided by desire to almost better understand both self and others through examining one's actions and perceptions in reference to and dialogue with those of others. Symbiotic reflexivity really entails researchers' consistent and conscious engagement in different forms of reflexive activities as applied to different aspects of their study, including theoretical, methodological, and very importantly, ethical aspects of their study. These three components form the basis of symbiotic reflexivity that is defined in this context as researchers' simultaneous consideration and scrutiny of their own epistemological, methodological, and ethical assumptions in terms of examining both the possible underlying sociocultural sources of these assumptions and the ways in which they inform the construction of the phenomena that they're trying to study. So considering all this discussion, I've got to say that I never expected and never thought that symbiotic autoethnography will actually be used as one static feature or one static framework, again in inverted commas, that will apply to any research at any point. So I'm leaning here on this quote, suggesting that any criteria in qualitative research should be viewed as a list of features that needs to be continuously reviewed and interpreted. And I hope you, my audience, will also use your sense and your skills of being a connoisseur to make a decision whether symbiotic approach is for you or whether you want to adapt it to suit particular needs of your research and your research question. So it is always important to be critical in your approach and your selection of your methodological assumptions and decisions. So, and finally, if you want to find out more, please join me on Twitter. This is my Twitter handle, Symbiotic Auto-A1, or follow my channel on YouTube. You will find me if you type in Liana Beattie or Symbiotic Autoethnography. I have got 3 videos there, and what I do on this channel is I consider the comments and questions from my students in response to previous videos or the questions that I received during my sessions, and then I use those as a basis for my next video. So please feel free to email me after the event, and I know there will be a session now when you will probably have some questions, but I'm happy to receive any emails from you or questions even after this event is over. So I'm going to stop sharing now. Okay, so I'm sorry about these technical problems. You never expect them to happen, but they always happen somehow. So I hope you could see the slides and you can hear my voice anyway. So
it was absolutely fine, Liana. Yes, we could hear you, we could see you. And I just want to thank you for that. Was an absolutely fascinating talk.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I've got a million questions, but before I start, because I could talk all day, are there any questions? If you would like to either drop them in chat or put your hand up and you can take the mic. So, yes, exactly, Natalie. I think we're all, there's just so much to take in there. I will maybe ask a first question. Liana, how would you advise somebody to get started with autoethnography? Maybe how do you advise your students to get started?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Sarah, and this is the one that I'm always asked by my students. I briefly mentioned that in my presentation, but the most important thing is to answer 2 questions. The first one, where is your area of interest? Where do you think is that cultural phenomena or the ethno part of autoethnography that you are going to focus on in your approach? This is my first question to my students, because in many occasions they say, oh, for example, I had, or my mom had cancer. I had a question like that. My mom had cancer and I had to go through this a process of being a carer for my mother. So can I use this autoethnography? And I say, this is significant experience, but what is it that you are trying to explore? What is the question? What is this cultural phenomena? And sometimes people misunderstand when I say cultural, they almost think it's rituals and traditions. Well, culture can be applied to anything. It can be culture of the workplace, it be culture of teaching, it is very broad understanding of culture in this sense. So the first question to ask is, what is that cultural phenomena that I'm going to explore? And the second question is, of course, how do these significant experiences of that cultural phenomena that I have can be used as data to be explored within that study? Also, a slightly controversial third question is there anything else out there in research that already exists in relation to the exploration of that cultural phenomena? And sometimes people say to me, well, I want to, for example, explore basket weaving, and there's absolutely nothing in research related to basket weaving. So my advice here will be to insert brand new knowledge into the existing field of autoethnography. It is possible, but I think you already have to have some credibility, academic credibility behind you. If you're a student, my suggestion would be to choose a topic or to choose research question that is already widely discussed in literature. Otherwise, I know that autoethnography can take many different formats, but when you present your thesis or your dissertation at the final examination, people will be looking for literature and how your research question is embedded and fits with the existing research. And to meet this criteria, you must ensure that there is something out there already that can provide you with critical and interpretative evaluation of your own experiences. I hope I answered your question, Sarah.
You answered it perfectly. And there's just a question come in the chat from Elizabeth Lovely. And she says, thank you for a fascinating and informative chat. We all agree with that.
Thank you.
Would you agree that practice-based research is by default autoethnographic?
Well, that is a good question, because I had a discussion, and I think I upset some people actually by saying that not only practice-based research, but any research, in my view, is partially autoethnographic. Because when we say, even when we think about medical research, you can see that the opinions differ greatly, you know, even with all these instruments of, you know, quantitative and qualitative tools that are used widely in medical research, we still don't have single opinion on something. One group of people say, yeah, you need to eat salmon. Others say, don't eat salmon. Yeah, avocados are good for you. No, avocados are not good for you. So it always depends on the person's ontological position and on the researcher's ontological position, which creates bias. If we create bias, it means that their own subjective experiences and opinions are included in their research. And when I speak to my students, I sometimes, I don't know why I gravitate towards food, but I sometimes compare this ontological position with cooking and you following a recipe. For example, if you are vegan, you will be using specific type of recipe. You will not be including meat or any animal products in your cooking. In the same way, if you have specific ontological position, if you believe in ghosts, it means that you will write anything very, relevant to the Halloween coming up, for example. You will be writing everything through this lens of believing in ghosts. If you believe in God, you will be writing your research study through the lens of this religious understanding of the world. So yes, the participant research, sorry, what research was mentioned? Can you repeat? Was it
practice-based research?
Yes, absolutely. Practice-based research will have maybe higher degree of autoethnographic data within it, and other types of research will have a lesser degree of autoethnographic influence. But as I said, in my view, every research has some kind of autoethnographic influence within them, because we cannot remove researcher bias from any research. All we have to do is to acknowledge the presence of our bias, which of course goes completely against positivist approach. But I think this is a fact and we can't go against that. And that proves the presence of so many different opinions in any type of research on the same issue. So I hope I answered your question.
You did. Elizabeth has just dropped into the chat the impossibility of activity. And I think that's, yes, that shows that that's exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
Natalie has put a really good question in chat. Natalie, do you want to take the mic?
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Hi, Natalie.
Hi, Liana. Thank you very much again for your presentation. I think one of the questions that's always difficult for colleagues who are not used to that type of research is, once you know what you want to explore, how do you actually start collecting data, and what do you consider as data? I think, yeah, that would be good.
Thank you, Natalie. Yeah, that is also a very good question, because when we think about data in autoethnography, that is the question that every student asks me: what is data in autoethnography? And my simple answer to this question is everything is data in autoethnography. So the starting point perhaps will be not use the term collect data, because really speaking, the data is already there. You are the data. Your experiences is the data. So rather than collecting data in symbiotic approach, I suggest using the term discern the data. So it is a very rigorous, reflexive and reflective exercise where you need to decide which experiences of that phenomena are significant in your life. For example, when I was writing my thesis, I was thinking about the experiences that I had in relation to Soviet leadership. And I remembered specific moments that made me reflect on my experiences as I remember them today. For example, I remember entering a school principal's office where he was sitting in a massive leather chair, smoking cigarette, never asking me to sit down. And the whole atmosphere created a very heavy, hierarchical, almost feeling in my head. So I thought that was significant experience for me. So I created what I called flashbacks. I've written down what I remembered as I remembered it today. And I use this flashback or extracts from these flashbacks in my research. Another way of discerning data is to use your reflexive diary, because as you think about your research, as you think about the process and how you're going to approach it, you always keep a diary. You log everything that you think of. And I know some of you will probably have notebooks next to your beds. So when you wake up at night thinking, oh my goodness, I just come up with another idea, you've got pen and paper right in front of you, which I did anyway. So that is another way. So extracts from your reflexive diary, you discern this data from that. Also, I use participants. I used 6 participants and I did in-depth interviews with them. So extracts from, I discerned extracts from their records of these interviews. And also your own autoethnographic writing, because you will be writing in an autoethnographic way, combining all these elements and also using elements from your interpretative approach in terms of interpreting relevant literature and supporting your assumptions with critical analysis. So that can also be used as discerned data. So from my point of view, the best way to approach it is to think about where the data might come from and discern data from the specific sources of data. So differentiate clearly between sources of data and these bits of data, discern data that you're going to use. And one of the approaches can be a layered account, when you actually start writing it up, as we say, when, I don't know whether it directly applies to autoethnography, because the whole autoethnography is a write-up. This is when you create a layered account. You identify, obviously, some themes will probably emerge from all this data. And then you identify the theme, and then you weave the voices of your participants with your own voice, with the voices of the characters from your story, because obviously you will be writing about other people. These other people that you're writing about, they might not be aware of you writing about them, but that's an ethical feature of autoethnography. So all this will create sources of data for you, which you will then discern and put into a layered account, including your extracts from your reflexive diary, extracts from your participants' interview, if you're using any, and perhaps your theoretical framework. Are you using? I used Michel Foucault's theoretical framework, so I used extracts from his work. And that's, in my view, what creates the symbiosis within your autoethnographic writing in terms of layering these discerned elements of data. Sorry, it was too long, but I can talk about this for ages. Did I answer your question, Natalie, more or less? Yeah, okay.
So I think Natalie actually had a follow-up question.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't want to take over. the one thing that's actually I'm always wondering about is, how do you address that kind of change of memory phenomenon? You know, how we remember maybe something differently, in particular as time goes on, our memories may change or become more biased. So how do you address that in a, you know, in an autoethnographic piece of work? You know, how do you you know, how are you transparent about, or how do you actually make yourself aware of these potential changes?
Yeah, good question, good question. And also in relation to your previous question, our memories are always data. You can discern extracts from your memories as data. But the most important thing, in my view, and specifically in symbiotic approach, is to explicitly acknowledge in your autoethnographic writing that what you're writing only applies to that particular moment of writing. I call it actually writing in the moment, and it is in the book, but I just didn't have enough time today to talk about that. So that acknowledgement almost protects you from any specific questions in relation to what happened after and what happened before. Because first of all, you acknowledge that your writing is reflecting your present memories of the past. That's one aspect. So you're not writing about what you thought, or you might write what you thought at that moment in the past, but still you're writing about this as you see it today in the moment of writing. And the second point that you need to acknowledge explicitly in your work, that you providing almost a snapshot of your understanding of this cultural phenomena in the moment of writing again. Because as I mentioned, tomorrow we will be different. And after this session, I might change my perceptions about certain things following our discussion between us. And in the same way, you will change your perceptions, but you might have written a paper 2 weeks ago that do not reflect this reflections, okay. But it is important, especially in autoethnography, to explicitly acknowledge what your work is. So that's my answer. Anyway, I don't know whether it resolves the issue.
Yes, thank you. That moment of writing rather than the moment of the memory, that made the difference for me. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Liana, I've got a question that I have been thinking about for a couple of weeks now.
Yeah.
I went to a seminar on autoethnography that was run by Lancaster University, and one of the presenters asked a question of the audience that didn't get picked up. And what he said was, how would you challenge an autoethnography? And his follow-up question, challenge personal experience. And that's just been going through my mind ever since then.
How can you challenge? I don't quite get the meaning of that. How you challenge autoethnography, the value of autoethnography or autoethnographic narrative.
I think a particular autoethnography.
Right. Well, I think, well, the first one, well, in my thesis, I had to actually almost provide a rationale of why I'm using autoethnography and how I can defend my choice of autoethnography. So the first one for me was, though autoethnography is always challenged as a research approach, it is standing nowadays on the shoulders of giants. So we cannot close our eyes and dismiss all this research that already exists in terms of the work of Ellis and Bochner, Sarah Delamont, the millions. So the first point for me was it is standing on the shoulders of giants. The next one, challenging the fact that it is subjective experience that is used in research. Well, in traditional sense, reliability of research depends very much on how close the researcher can get to the data. And for example, when in other maybe more traditional types of qualitative research, we interview people and then we use this as data, and then we interpret what they said in their interviews. But can we really get close to these participants' data? How do we know that what they say is indeed what they experienced? Because unfortunately, you know that not all interviews or interviewees express the true state of events. Sometimes that can be power relationship between you and interviewee. Sometimes interviewees want to say what you want to hear. And there are many aspects of why this data can be distorted in terms of, well, again, in inverted commas, truthfulness of the participants. In our case, you can't get any closer to data as an autoethnography because data is you. So you have direct symbiosis with the data because you are the data. So in this case, you provide more, again, in inverted commas, everything reliable data in autoethnography. And the third one, people say, so what? You tell your story, somebody else tells their story. What is the point? I mean, people ridicule autoethnography in this way on many occasions. I saw it on Twitter. I saw it in many other sources at conferences. But what we respond to that is that any autoethnography creates a voice. It creates a narrative that joins other voices and other narratives, and that changes the overall narrative of what is happening in the world today. And though, because I mentioned already, I believe that other types of research also have autoethnographic value within them and features within them, that's what changes the narratives around us. Well, we, for example, used corporal punishment in schools many years ago, but then psychology, child psychology entered the research area and created their own narrative. Psychologists provided their own stories or research stories that entered that field of education, and it changed the whole narrative. So never think that if you are providing one story about some insignificant, in some people's view, subject, that it won't make any difference, because it will join the narratives that are already there, making them stronger and disrupting already existing narratives in some cases, and changing actually the direction of these narratives. I don't know whether this is what you asked, Sarah, but I talked about this anyway.
I'm not really sure what the presenter was asking, which is why it fascinated me so much, because there's, as you say, there's so many different ways of challenging an autoethnography.
Yes, well, these are experiences of being challenged as autoethnographer that I had, so perhaps this partially answers the question.
Yes, I think it does. So Jen has just dropped a comment into chat, and she said a good example of what you're talking about is the hearing voices movement in mental health practice and research. And I don't know much about that.
I can give a quick overview if that would help.
Yep, do.
Hi, so that's one of the main, oh, excuse me, my camera's up on my forehead. So the hearing voices movement started in the 1980s when the kind of conceptualization of the experience of hearing voices was of a symptom of mental illness, and it was closely linked in with schizophrenia, but there was some work done that resulted in something called the Maastricht interview in the Netherlands, which was completed by academics, I believe, with a lived experience and participants who still had a lived experience. And the Maastricht interview was a qualitative, quantitative interview that the researcher did with each person with the experience. And it explored their particular experience of hearing voices. So it kind of had an emancipatory, transformative aspect in that the person went away with a very unique understanding of their voices and how it occurred and the reasons for it and the life links went into it. But over the last 30 years, the data from these individual interviews has amalgamated and has actually created a body of data which has changed the perception of voices in mental health practice. It's contributed to the Hearing Voices movement, which is an international organisation of groups that are peer support led by for people who have a hearing voices. But off the basis of all that, other research has been done where they've actually discovered that it's not just people who have diagnosable mental illness, things like schizophrenia and psychosis, that actually quite a large number of the population have an experience of hearing voices, and the focus needs to be actually on those people who struggle or are traumatized or have difficulties with it, and kind of teasing out the reasons for those, which has then obviously gone into research looking at things like adverse childhood experiences. So that those small interviews that have been undertaken, along with the focus of a lived experience and the reasons that research needs to be done in a different way, you know, your ontological perspective and epistemological approach, have actually had massive impacts. Kind of, it's over 30 or 40 years on mental health research, mental health practice, the construct of hearing voices, support for people with these experiences, and also further developments on research that have gone on in hearing voices kind of in the general population. Does that sum it up well on how individual voices can come together and then change a narrative? And you know, this is quite a global movement in what I would describe as, you know, Western countries, but it's actually also now being joined by indigenous experiences of hearing voices that you know, and post-colonial views, where you've got different cultural accounts and understandings of hearing voices, and it's really coalescing into something very interesting. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Jen. I think this is an excellent example of the value of stories and autoethnographic narratives. And also I want to mention the fact that other types of research that is not autoethnographic maybe has less opportunities to be to have access to wider public, but autoethnography seems to be taken off in terms of wider dissemination. And this is the main aim of research is dissemination. Because if you have research that is sitting in your drawer, it's not research at all. You create new knowledge and then you disseminate your knowledge, so it has an impact. And why it is disseminated, why the impact it might have. And also because it is a story, every autoethnography is a story, and everybody likes stories. I always say stories are omnipresent. I think this is how I start the book. They are like air, they are omnipresent. Everybody likes stories and stories are everywhere. I think that's why autoethnography has better chances to reach wider audiences, because people like reading them. They like finding out about different aspects of life through this narrative and type of narratives that we provide. So thank you, Jen. That was a very useful example.
Right, I've got one final question before we let you go, and it's probably a slightly unfair one, but it's one that Natalie and I grapple with. How would you advise somebody to go about putting in an ethics application and for an autoethnography? Don't laugh, Natalie.
Yeah, I knew this would come up. Yeah, I knew it. Right, there are many different ways of addressing this issue. So because you asked this question, you're probably aware of the issues related to autoethnography in terms of ethical approvals. And this is mostly related to relational ethics. Relational ethics means that when you write autoethnography, you also write about people that might not be aware that you're writing about them. So that creates a first issue. Another issue is that when you publish your research, or even if you present it to wider audiences, because it's auto, they know that it is you. Therefore, the people that you write about might be recognizable to other people. So if I write autoethnography, people know I work at Edgehill University. Therefore, they can kind of figure out if I'm writing about my current experiences, who is it that I'm writing about? Some people will, some people won't. So what are the ways around it? The first way around it is perhaps not necessarily applicable to ethical approval, to use pseudonym when you're writing, so nobody actually knows your real name. And that protects everybody within the research, so nobody knows who you are, therefore nobody knows who you're writing about. The second way of protecting yourself, and also, well, the items that I use, the aspects that I'm talking about, they can be used as points in your ethical approval, because you need to, the main approval or ethical approval point is not to harm anybody, not to cause any harm. So the first one, as I mentioned, is to anonymize yourself. The next one will be to create multivocal narrative. So if you're using participants, you can create pseudonyms for them or ask them better to suggest their own pseudonyms. And then you create multivocal narrative where it's impossible to differentiate who says what. So within that, you can include your own voice, also with a pseudonym. So, and you use that point in your ethical approval. So you use your own voice, which is also anonymized. So it is embedded in your narrative. So nobody knows whose voice is that and who is talking, who is saying what about who. Obviously, anonymized locations, anonymized names, no names at all. That's a generic rule, as you know, for any ethical approvals. Another way forward is to create fictionalized narrative, where you accept in your or your note in your ethical application that this narrative is a fiction. So none of this really happened in reality. So it changed to the point where it becomes non-reality, it becomes a fiction, but you keep the focus on the cultural phenomenon that you're exploring. This is more tricky one. It's almost, you write a book, as we say, based on real events, but it's not real events. So you do that in your, acknowledge that in your ethical application. And finally, it might be a good point to say that you're expressing your own opinion. So it does mean, for example, somebody was in an abusive relationship and they write about ex-husband or something. And other people might say, oh my goodness, he's an excellent person, he's a lovely person, and now his reputation is damaged. Well, first of all, this person's identity will be anonymized, but also perhaps if it is still more or less obvious who you're writing about, you can always acknowledge that this is your own opinion and this is your reflection on your own experiences of that particular person. So in combination, all these almost strategies should help you to get your autoethnography through the ethics committee or other boards that you, in your particular example, they have to go through.
Thank you. That's really, really helpful. And actually, it sort of ties back to how you challenge personal experience, isn't it? You acknowledge that it is a personal experience, but there
Yes,
are
absolutely.
other interpretations.
Oh yeah, now I understand better here what you meant. Yeah.
Well, but I don't know if I understand what he meant, but as you were talking, I thought, oh yeah, that's one way of answering a challenge about personal experience.
Yeah.
Right, it's, according to my clock, it's 27 minutes past 11. We said we would finish at 12:30. Liana, you have been absolutely brilliant. I can't thank you enough for coming along. I've got so much out of this.
Inviting me.
Yeah.
Thank you. I thoroughly enjoyed being here, and thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you for your questions and for spending an hour or hour and a half of your valuable time. I know academics are busy population, so thank you for your time and for your attention.
Yeah, and thank you everyone. And as I've said, Liana, if you can send me a copy of the slides, I'll send the slides and a copy of the recording around to everyone.
I will do. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to email me and I will be happy to answer.
And I'll include Liana's email in the information that I send out to everyone, so you've got it all together.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very, very much.
For the rest of your day. Thank you.
Okay, goodbye, everyone.
Bye.